Hello everyone! Patch 7.2 is finally here. After 3 patches that don't fix the meta, is this one finally gonna step up to the plate? Let's find out. Be sure to subscribe if you enjoy, and let's get into it. Let's start with the main weapons buffs. The Splatoon is having the shot collision box extended slightly to make it easier to hit opponents. Basically, it has slightly bigger bullets, which means up close it's going to be more reliable, which, I mean, that's kind of Sploosh's thing. Up next are both the Splattershot Pros and H3s. Pro is going from 42 to 45 damage, and H3 from 41 to 44 damage. Both of these are going to give them slightly more fall-off range, better DPS, and just allow them to combo with weapons more easily. The only one of these weapons, though, that I think is good enough to see some use off of these is Forge Pro specifically, which I'm not sure. I think on niche maps where Forge is already something you'd want to consider, like Flounder or Sturgeon, it makes it a bit more worth it. But is it going to allow it to break into the meta against the strong fighting mid-range weapons that are in the game right now? I don't know. Forge is more trying to be a flexible weapon, and I don't think it does the flexible job well enough to warrant its use. I could be wrong though, 90 damage in 2 shots is still very scary. H3 on the other hand definitely still needs a little bit more, but I think when it does get another buff, this is going to be more impactful then, and it's still nice for the time being. Splattershot Nova is getting a slight RNG reduction of 8%. Not enough to be too drastic in my opinion, but at least the weapon is going to feel a bit better. If Inkjet becomes a bit more prominent in a future meta, I could see it mattering. Luna Blaster is getting a paint increase when the shot explodes in the air by 20%, which is kind of similar to the buff Range Blaster got a few patches back, which will help it get its special a little bit, but more importantly means that when it hits someone, it's more likely to paint under their feet, making the next shot easier, which I think is fine, given that if Luna is able to hit you with its indirect range, given how short it is, it's probably already done its job. S-Blast is also getting a buff, getting a radius increase from 1.8 to 2.0, or about 11%. However, there is a catch to this. The increased radius will only do 50 damage. This isn't changing the radius damage curve as a whole, which means the percent damage numbers you need for burst combos are not going to be improved in this patch. I still think that this is a solid change. A little bit more range and reliability is very helpful in its long range mode, and it might allow it to be in discussion a little bit more when being compared with the other strong AoE weapons of Range Blaster and Bucket, especially given that range gets nerfed a little bit later. Is it enough for S-Blast to be in a good spot though? I'm not sure. It might need a little bit more, but we'll have to see when it's tested out. Paintbrush's rolling will now paint about 18% better, sure I guess, and it will also have 10 less frames of white ink. Paintbrush has continued to get buffs to the ink efficiency, which I think is still an area where it could use a bit of buffs, but it probably needs a little bit more help with its wind-up time if it is to be competitively used. Better buffs to Wavebreaker for its vanilla kit. Like with many of these other weapons, it is a good buff, but probably not enough to make it see significant competitive uses. Dapple Dualies are getting a movement speed buff of 5% when strafing. They were already pretty fast, and Dapples are already a pretty solid weapon at close range, so now they're going to be even better. Again, this weapon has always had a problem with the kits, but at least they're making the gun a lot more insane to make up for it. If Dapple ever gets a good third kit, it's going to be a monster on short range maps. Next up are the specials. Big Bubbler is up first, getting reduced damage to the weak point of it by 22%. This is a pretty substantial buff, as the weak points are a big target for things like Slosher or Stamper that can hit it and the bubble itself. I really think there's only one big bubble weapon that's on the radar right now, which is Roller, but there are some other niche ones. Junior and Zimmy could work in some comps, and Blaster is pretty good for tower control where Bubble's already good. So maybe we'll see more of those weapons. Splatter Color Screen is having an increase in damage for opponents who touch it from 30 to 40. Now you can just parry the screen to avoid all damage, which most of the time should be more than doable, but I guess it's still nice. In theory, if you have to pass through the screen multiple times, it could be a little bit awkward, and screens on 52 and Squeezer, which are both strong main weapons. So I mean, it'll probably still help. Kraken Cheese is fixed. Jumping to a Kraken will now jump to where the Kraken started rather than its current position. I think this is indirectly kind of a buff though. Yeah, you can't jump to Kraken if it gets deep into the enemy base, but you can now really easily just hide jumps to wherever the Kraken started if there's no recall indicator on it, which as far as I'm aware, it's not going to have an actual marker for where it started. This means you could potentially hide jumps to get back in, which could allow other players to be more aggressive, knowing regroups with Tacticooler can just happen to where the Kraken was popped. Honestly, could lead to some interesting strats, and it's great to see Kraken Cheese finally being fixed. Now let's fix Back, Strike, and Slider Cheese on zones too, please. Thanks. Triple Splashdown is probably getting the most interesting of these changes. It's getting buffed in one regard, being 10 frames faster for both the player and the fist to hit the ground, which brings Splashdown to its Splatoon 2 speed. However, the total radius size of the 60 damage hitbox is actually being nerfed by approximately 13%. Triple Splashdown is currently a very good special in low-level play and a very bad special in high-level play, and the devs directly state that this is why they're nerfing it and buffing it in this way, which is great. This special needs a lot more done to it, but if they're willing to adjust it in this way to make it more balanced at all levels of play, I think it's a good change. Maybe we can see something like the Splashdown Super Jump being buffed, which I think would go an especially long way in another patch. Finally is the points for special changes, and we got a few of them, so let's lightning round them. Neo Splash-O-Matic and NZAP89 are both 10 points cheaper. This is a 170 shooter, but at least it has a 10-second cooldown. And Neo Splash just already spams Strike too much, so I don't see why it was necessary. Neither of these really needed to happen, but they're not the most offensive thing in the world. Carbon Roller will be our first 160 weapon in Splatoon 3. Let's go! They really want people to pick this one over the other kit for some reason. I don't know why they think that's ever gonna happen. It's not harmful since it's on a weapon that'll pretty much never be picked, but I hope we don't see 160 on something dumb later. Gold Dynamo Roller will be 180 for Chumps, which is fine by me. Splat Charger will be 190 for Vac. Dapple Dooley will be 170 for Cooler. Yes, I don't really think this matters, the kit is just that bad. And from here, we get to the nerfs. The Splatter Shot will be increased from 200 to 210, the Squeezer from 210 to 220, and the Snipe Rider from 200 to 210. This reduces the spammability of Cooler and Zuka, the two best specials in the game, on the three best weapons that have them. I'll talk more about if this matters in just a second, because there is one more nerf. Range Blaster is being increased from 200 to 210. Honestly, the most relevant thing to me is that if Range gets Kraken or another good kit, it's probably going to be 210 on it, because I don't really care about 210 Wave when it is a wave breaker. It really doesn't do a lot. Range is a pretty popular top 500 solo weapon and solid spot competitive weapon-wise, so I don't really mind this nerf, especially because the paint buff it got previously with the radius explosion honestly just makes it a net positive anyway. The devs have also stated two other changes that are worth noting. One is that if you place in the top 1000 of any ranked mode, you will be deranked to S+0 instead of S rank, meaning you do not have to play to get S+10 if you're an X rank top 1000 solo grinder, which is a good change because my god, that grind is annoying. There is also a fix in Salmon Run. The new map had it to where you could just kind of use ink rails to get all the way to where golden eggs would spawn, then throw the eggs in the water, and it would basically go all the way to the basket. Yeah, they fixed that. I think it'll go to the base of the ink rail now, if I remember correctly, like whichever one you're on the furthest, which basically makes this not helpful. So, as a whole, what do I think? I've seen some people saying this patch does nothing, and some people saying this is one of the best patches. Personally, I fall in the middle. I'm gonna be honest, guys, pencil comps are probably still gonna be the most common, and no nerfs to the BS parts of Zuka is still pretty unfair, honestly. The special really does need some adjustments. But I think the notable part is Pencil Shot and Squeezer are typically weapons that are ran at least 2 or 3 of them in the same comp, which means I think this points for special change will still add up to making these harder and, more importantly, slowing down their special spammability, which means more mid-range fight-heavy comps with strong main weapons will be a bit better against them. Is it enough to allow those comps to fall out of favor entirely? I don't think so. I think Zuka still needs a few more nerfs for it to be fair, and I think Pencil still gets too much cooler. It might need 220p or another nerf in future. But the good news is, compared to the other patches, it's a step in the right direction. In terms of buffs, I think my chart on the changes should sum up why I'm not too satisfied with them. There's a lot of stuff in the right direction, but to me, there is no major winner of this patch outside of Roller, which is purely because Roller is already good without the bubble changes, so it'll affect it more being an already solid weapon. I don't think this patch allows weapons that don't see use to be able to see use again. The two weapons that would possibly be closest for this is the S-Blast 91 and the Forged Splattershot Pro, mostly because these two weapons already have pretty solid kits and guns as is. And even then, I really don't see them seeing much use. Maybe S-Blast from a dedicated player and Forge as a map niche, but that's not really enough here for the buffs department. This definitely seems like a step in the right direction, and if Worlds has an impact on the next patch, since it definitely didn't here with how soon it is, we could potentially see more favorable changes if this continues. I hope this is a start of patches getting in a better direction and not an outlier, because while this isn't enough right now, it is certainly a nice change of pace. So I'll give it an overall 6 out of 10. I think that seems fair. We'll see what they do with Undertow Spillway tomorrow. See you guys then.